Come, Holy Spirit, come. Speak to our empty lives.
Come, Holy Spirit, come.
Furnish a feast for our souls.
Come, Holy Spirit, come.
Inspire our church with vision. Pour out your power and love. As we worship, inflame us with wisdom and purpose.
Come, Holy Spirit, come.
And now let's sing hymn number 391, Sweet, Sweet Spirit. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not be much more readily in subjection to the Father of spirits, who in life? For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now let's sing another hymn here, number 310. You may remain seated. Called "Lead Me to Calvary."
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
which repeats one part that was in the previous scripture. We'll be reading from chapter 3, verses 5 through 12. Hear the word of the Lord. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh, and strength to your bones. Honor the Lord with your possessions, and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, just as a father the son in whom he delights. This is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Envy slayeth the silly. Sounds funny, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
That's in chapter 5 here of book of Job. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But I came across that, it sort of made me chuckle. So I thought, there's a good title. It'll get some attention. But basically, we're not supposed to be jealous of others. It makes us look silly when we do. And really, it refers to the simple, as though someone who can't even think or really do things properly, and that's why they feel that way. But we're continuing in our study with the book of Job, and we find ourselves at chapter 5 this week. And after hearing Job wail and moan and cry in chapter 3 because of the things that happened to him in his life and his family and all his possessions, we then listen to some spiritual deception from Satan through one of Job's friends named Eliphaz when we went through chapter 4 last week. And now as we enter chapter 5, Eliphaz is now saying to Job, "Call now, if there be any that will answer you, and to which of the saints will thou turn?" Well, it sounds like here that in those days there may have been those who had already developed some saints that they were turning to in time of trouble. Who is the patron saint for boils on your body, for example? That sounds like they were turning to that type of thing to pray instead of God himself. Now it sounds like that was sort of an emphasis that was presented by Satan as the spirit who came to Eliphaz. So if you remember, not everything that he says here is sound advice. There is some element of truth going through it all, though. He continues in verse 2 of chapter 5, saying, "For wrath killeth the foolish, and envy slayeth the silly. I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I cursed his habitation. His children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them." Now he's accusing Job here of foolishness and silliness and all of that, because you see, Job's children were crushed when the house fell on them during a storm earlier. And so he said, "I've seen the foolish people and all, and their children get crushed in the gate, just like yours did. So you must be foolish here and silly." Okay? Verse 5, he says, "Whose harvest the hungry eateth up, and taken it even out of the thorns. And the robber swalloweth up their substance. Well, if you remember back in verse 1, the Sabaeans and the Chaldeans had come in and stolen everything that Job had, all of his possessions, and killed his servants. And so Eliphaz is trying to make this all applicable to Job, saying, this is what's happened to you. You're the foolish one, and you had taken root, but suddenly you're cursed. Envy slayeth the silly. Who are you jealous of? He's asking. What are you, a simpleton or something? You know, and although affliction comes not forth of the dust, he continues in verse 6, neither doth trouble spring out of the ground. Yet man is born unto trouble, as the sparks fly upward. Now that's a great philosophy for life, isn't it? I mean, man, he's saying, man, you were born for trouble, just like the sparks that fly upward. You know, unfortunately, it sort of seems to be the case here in this situation. But then he goes on and advises Job, I would seek unto God, if I were you, and unto God would I commit my cause, which doeth great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. He who giveth rain upon the earth, and sendeth waters upon the field, to set up on high those that be low, and those which mourn may be exalted to safety. He disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. He taketh the wise in their own craftiness, and the counsel of the froward is carried headlong. Froward, that word is opposite of tour or tor. And basically froward means something like perverted or contrary. All right? And he's saying that they meet with darkness in the daytime and grope in the noonday as the light. And he continues saying, but he saves the poor from the sword, from their mouth, and from the hand of the mighty. So the poor hath hope, and iniquity stoppeth her mouth. Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. Now Solomon, no doubt, was familiar with Job, because in his advice to his son, which we just read from the book of Proverbs here, Solomon said, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be thou weary with his correction, just as is being said here. And also, of course, Paul picked it up in the New Testament, which we read, or whoever wrote the book of Hebrews, I think it was Paul, but whoever wrote that picked that up also and said, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord. And happy is everyone who is scourged by him, is punished by him, corrected by him. So here in Job 5, Eliphaz first of all says, hey, don't despise God's chastening, his correction. Happy is the man whom God corrects. Don't despise the chastening of the Almighty, for he makes sore and bindeth up. He woundeth, and his hands make whole. He shall deliver thee in 6 troubles. Yea, in 7 there shall no evil touch thee. Now he doesn't really list 7 troubles here like that he just mentioned, but he does speak of a few. God will spare you in the time of famine, he says. In famine he will redeem thee from death. and in war from the power of the sword, he will save you. Thou shalt be hid from the scourge of the tongue, neither shalt thou be afraid of destruction when it cometh. And so there are 4 of the 7 he mentioned. He doesn't tell us the other 3. Instead, he comes back now to destruction and famine. Though he does say, thou shalt laugh, neither shalt thou be afraid of the beasts of the earth. So that would be 5. For thou shalt be in league with the stones of the field, and the beasts of the field shall be at peace with thee. And thou shalt know that thy tabernacle shall be in peace, and thou shalt visit thy habitation, and shalt not sin. Thou shalt know also that thy seed shall be great, and thine offspring as the grass of the earth. Thou shalt come to thy grave in a full age, like as a shock of corn cometh in its season. Lo, this we have searched it, so it is. Hear it, and know it, for your own good. He's saying, so here's the way it is, Job. This is the way the cow eats its cabbage, you know. Listen to me, for your own good. Just get right with God, man. That's all you need, is sort of what he's saying. And Eliphaz asserts this confidently, sounding almost arrogant about it, really. And it seems that earlier that evil spirit must have so impressed him with his deceptive message, as some of this is, that Eliphaz was sure he was conveying divinely inspired advice to Job, not from some other spirit. And as we shall soon see, he had convinced the other friends, Bildad and Zophar, that this message was also what they should say to Job. And they kind of say some of the same things in some chapters soon, but when we get to chapter 6, Job responds to him, and he says, "Oh, that my grief were thoroughly weighed, and my calamities laid in the balances together." And we need to picture this. See, in those days, the balances, the scales, always had little weights that they put on one side, and then, you know, when you're buying grapes or whatever that you were buying from someone, they would put those on the other side of the scale until they balanced out. And when the balances became equal, you had, say, the weight of a talent. That was a unit of weight that was often used. You buy a talent of grapes. Once they balanced, that was your amount of grapes, and you would pay whatever the going rate was. So picture the balances here when he's saying this. Now he said, "Oh, that my calamities, my griefs were laid in the balance. They would be heavier than the sands of the sea." So you picture all the sand of the sea put on one side of the balance, and then on the other side you pour out Job's calamities and his grief until it balances out. And I think maybe he's exaggerating just a little bit, saying they would be heavier than all the sands of the sea on the other side. But he continues, saying, "Therefore my words are swallowed up, for the arrows of the Almighty are within me. The poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me. Does the wild donkey bray when he hath grass? Or does the ox loweth over his fodder? Can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? The things that my soul refused to touch are as my sorrowful meat, Oh, that I might have my request, that God would just grant me the thing that I long for. So what is it, Job, that you're requesting of God? I'm asking that. He says, even that it would please God to destroy me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. So poor old Job, he's really in desperate straits here, saying, I just wish God would grant me my request, the thing that I long for. And it's just that I be dead, that I be cut off. I can't stand life anymore. I'm sure all of us have come to situations in our lives that are so unsavory, so distasteful, that we've had some of these same thoughts pass through our minds. Oh, that God would grant me my desire. And yet, I don't think we always have really thought those thoughts through, or thinking them really sincerely when we do we? I mean, I think a lot of times we say something like that, like, I just wish I were dead, but we don't really mean it in most cases. Kind of like the fellow who was carrying a heavy load on a really hot day, and he finally came up to this river, and he just sort of collapsed and set the load down, and he was sitting there by the river, fatigued, and he said, I'm so tired I could just die. Death, please come, death. And then he felt a tap on his shoulder, and he looked up, and there was death. And it said, did you call me? And he said, yes. Would you help me pick up this pack on my back so I can get going again? Right? Yeah, see, we don't always mean what we're saying when we call for death or wish it was all over, right? But we feel that way sometimes, at least for the moment of despair. And Job is expressing it here himself, even though he still doesn't know what death is really all about, as we'll hear God say to him later. For if I were destroyed, he says, then should I have comfort. Yes, I would harden myself in sorrow. Let him not spare, for I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. So Job had somehow access to the words of the Holy One, here it says, either by direct inspiration or more likely through some primitive scriptures which were only for the ages before the call of Moses, as it mentions later on in chapter 23. It seemed they had some kind of written word from God. What is my strength, he asks, that I should hope? And what is mine end, that I should prolong my life? Is my strength the strength of stones? Or is my flesh of brass? Is not my help in me? And is wisdom driven quite from me? Now he's talking to Eliphaz, responding to the whole speech that he just heard from him. In verse 14 of chapter 6, he says, to him that is afflicted, pity should be showed from his friend. Look, man, I need pity. I don't need someone to come up and jump on my case at this point, he's saying. I need pity, not pious poetry. And then Job continues in pious poetry himself, and he says, my brethren have dealt deceitfully as a brook, and as the stream of brooks they pass away, which are blackish by reason of the ice, and wherein the snow is hid. What time they wax warm, they vanish. When it is hot, they are consumed out of their place. And now this is kind of picturesque poetry again. And so it's meant to be imagery. He's just saying, my friends are like ice or like snow. They appear to be friends, but when things get hot, they melt. They don't exist. I've had those kind of friends, haven't you? They're called fair weather friends, right? When things get hot, you never find them. He goes on, verse 18. The paths of their way are turned aside. They go to nothing and perish. And down to verse 21 here in 6. And he says, for now you are nothing. You see my casting down, and you are afraid. Did I say unto you, come to me, give me a reward of your substance? Or deliver me from the enemy's hand? Redeem me from the hand of the mighty? Job said, look, man, did I ask you to come around? Did I ask for anything? Don't help me no more. I'm tired of it. I didn't ask you for anything. I didn't say I want you to give me something. He's saying I didn't call for you. And here you are telling me all this stuff I don't want to hear. And then he went on to say, teach me, and I will hold my tongue. Verse 24. Tell me something that's worthwhile, he's saying, and I'll be quiet. You haven't told me anything worthwhile and caused me to understand wherein I've erred. So Job repeatedly emphasizes his willingness to confess and forsake any sin in his life if someone would tell him specifically what it was, instead of just condemning him in generalities. That's sort of what he's saying. And he continues in verse 26, saying, how forcible are right words, but what doth your arguing reprove? Do you imagine to reprove words and the speeches of one that is desperate, which are as wind? So again, he's saying, you're just a bag of wind, man. Eliphaz, you don't have anything to say of any value. Yeah, you overwhelm the fatherless and you dig a pit for your friend. Now, therefore, be content. Look on me, for it's evident unto you if I lie. Return, I pray you. Let it not be iniquity. Yeah, return again. My righteousness is in it. Is there any iniquity in my tongue? Cannot my taste discern perverse things? And then we're at chapter 7 where he says, is there not an appointed time to man upon the earth? Are not his days also like the days of a hireling? As a servant earnestly desires the shadow. That's the shadow of the clock going down till the shadow disappears, sort of like with a what they call sundial type thing. The servant waits for that because he has rest in the evening. And as the hireling looks for the reward of his work, so am I made to possess months of vanity. So apparently Job had already been suffering for months before the arrival of these friends. And wearisome nights are appointed to me. When I lie down, I say, when will I arise, and when will the night be gone? I am full of tossings to and fro until the dawning of the day. My flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My skin is broken, and it's become loathsome. So Job here is telling about his horrible condition. Clods of dirt clinging to the sores of his body, where they would begin to dry up and just hang there, and his flesh is all loathsome. He's been sick and sore like this. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope. Oh, remember that my life is wind, mine eye shall no more see good. The eye of him that hath seen me shall see me no more. Thine eyes are upon me, and I am not. As the cloud is consumed and vanishes away, so is he that goeth down to the grave. He shall come up no more. Well, Job doesn't really know what he's talking about here. He's getting kind of carried away. And he continues, he shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more. Therefore I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I a sea or a whale that you should watch over me? Well, the word for whale here is King James, really, it's referring to some kind of big sea monster. Okay, the word is tanin in Hebrew. It's usually translated as dragon or something like that. When I say, my bed shall comfort me, my couch shall ease my complaint, then you come along and try to scare me with your dreams, and you terrify me with your visions. Well, let me just say at this point, Job is turning from Eliphaz. He said, just leave me alone. I will choose to struggle in my own, I will choose to strangle in my own spittle rather than hear any more of your words. That's better than life and listening to you, he's saying. So Job is easily discerning that the things this guy's saying from that spirit that came to Eliphaz could not have been sent from God. Rather, the spirit intended merely to frighten him into blaspheming God, cursing God, like Satan is trying to get him to do. All right? So he is the one behind this. And he turns to God in verse 17 then, Job does. In addressing himself to God, he says, what is man that you should magnify him, and that you should set your heart upon him? It's an interesting question. What is man that God should exalt him, and that God should set his heart upon man? I like the hymn we'll be singing in just a moment here to finish the service. And can it be that I should gain an interest in the Savior's blood? Died he for me who caused his pain? You know, I sometimes like to sing that looking in the mirror to remind myself. Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? So think about singing that in the mirror sometimes. Job's just looking in the mirror here saying, God, what is man that you should magnify him, or that you should set your heart upon him? What am I that God should set his heart upon me? That God should desire my love. That God should desire my fellowship, my responses to him. It's the amazing mysteries of God that we sometimes just can't understand. And finally, finishing chapter 7 here, he says, and that you should visit him every morning and try him every moment. How long wilt you not depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my spittle? I have sinned. What shall I do unto thee? Well, he's using another picturesque phrase for death. I began to just swallow my own spit. That's it. I can't cough it up anymore. I'm gone. I've sinned. What shall I do unto thee, O preserver of men? I am a burden to myself. Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now shall I sleep in the dust, and thou shalt seek me in the morning, but I shall not be. So his complaint to God, why don't you forgive me, God? Why don't you relieve me of this? What's going on? And it's Job crying out of his misery. And he'll need to wait a while to get a good answer from Job. to get a good answer from God, which we'll hear later. That's about all we have time for today. So, homework for next week, read Job 8 through 10. Amen? Amen. All right. Let's finish up with that hymn I mentioned, number 347, And Can It Be? Please rise.